planet's puppet masters almost surely have a plan. There's clearly maybe something there beyond the realm of man. And until you've thoroughly tested every last close-justed view, I find the more you think you know, the less you really do.
That's true, Dr. Zayas. Very well.
Where would we be without THC? 'Cause we know they're lying to us, just don't know to what degree. Yeah, where would we be without THC? The higher side chat show, Greg Carwood and Company.
All right, people, many of us see the signs that we're on the verge of chaos in more ways than one. Tensions are high in America, with an election cycle as polarizing as ever and the war with police becoming the new normal. Europeans are lashing out against their EU overlords. The military-industrial complex is doing all it can to invoke World War III, and the Ponzi scheme house of cards that is the globalist economy seems to be on shakier ground than ever. These are troubled times indeed, and lucky for us, Jeff Berwick, the Dollar Vigilante himself, is back on THC to talk about bold and creative ways to keep us afloat amongst the madness. Jeff is an anarcho-capitalist and freedom fighter against mankind's two biggest enemies, the state and the central banks. Of course, he's also the founder of the Dollar Vigilante and host of the popular video podcast Anarchast. Jeff was fortunate enough to capitalize at the peak of the tech bubble, which freed him up to travel to over 100 countries in 5 years, and as a result, has become one of the biggest proponents of the permanent traveler, prior taxpayer theory, a true citizen of the world and a man bound by no borders. Jeff, welcome back to THC, man.
Always a pleasure. It's been too long.
Yeah, man, definitely. It's been about 3 years since that last show. Obviously, a lot has changed. I guess to kick this off, tell us a bit about what you've been up to and how you've been navigating these rough waters and what you've been seeing out there.
What I've been up to for the last 3 years? Wow, I don't even know. It's been, like I said, it's been a while since I've been on. Of course, I love your show, and so glad to be back on. I don't even know what I've done the last 3 years. It's been so much. It's just been insane, really. If you look at everything happening in the world today, I just know. I remember when I started the Dollar Vigilante in 2010. My biggest question was, what am I going to write about every day? It just wasn't that much stuff happening. There was definitely stuff happening, but it wasn't like anything like what's been going on for the last few years. And it just seems to be speeding up even more and more now. And I think the reason is because we're getting closer and closer to just complete crazy collapse sort of situation. Perhaps war, as you brought up, all sorts of civil unrest is possible. Definitely this summer. Financially, things are just so close to the end right now. Of course, 2008, it almost all blew up. It didn't fully blow up because they just decided to print more money for the last 8 years and go into negative interest rates now, which is insane. So yeah, there's so much going on, and I'm just working literally pretty much from the time I get up to the time I go to sleep every day, just trying to keep up.
Yeah, man, it is tough. And last time we talked, we focused really on the reality that it's such an uphill battle for Americans and the like, because our system is showing us fewer and fewer options, lower wages, crippling healthcare and college loan systems, and has also taken 40% of our taxes before we even see that paycheck. But I found some of your creative international options to be pretty hope-inspiring and attainable for anyone who's just had a basic amount of resources. Maybe you can tell us about where you see some of the best options around the globe for a do-over these days.
Well, I guess we should start sort of at the beginning. We just passed July 4th, which is Independence Day, which no one really celebrates anymore. They don't celebrate the independent part of it. They celebrate the government part of it, the flags and the fireworks that are all paid for by that stolen money. And isn't it funny that it was the entire independence revolution in the U.S. was because of a 2% tax on tea, and just tea. There was no income tax. There was nothing else. And people fought a really bloody war over that 2%. And now, as you mentioned, 50% of income tax. And that's just income tax, not including the sales tax, capital gains tax. You could literally go on and on for hours on all the taxes. I think if you really added them all up, for most people, it's probably 60 or 70% of what they make goes towards taxes. And no one seems to mind anymore. So that dumbing down sort of process has really worked out. It was really two people in the 20th century who sort of outlined what the agenda was. They were both essentially insiders, essentially Freemasons, George Orwell, of course, and Aldous Huxley. They both wrote two different ways that things could go, and actually it's turned out both of them actually happened. 1984, of course, and now with the NSA watching and reading everything you're doing and complete surveillance state and all this sort of political language, everything's the opposite of what it means. Like the Patriot Act is the exact opposite of what patriotism should actually be, and things like that. And then you have Aldous Huxley who said, no, what they'll do is they'll just dumb everyone down. They'll put fluoride in the water, which is a poison, which actually turns off your third eye, which actually turns off your awareness level in general. That's why they actually had it in the concentration camps in Germany, which actually most of that stuff's not true, but they were actually putting fluoride in the water there because it actually just dumbs people down and doesn't make them think too much. And then, of course, they give them all sorts of other things, and they make all the sort of decent sort of things that make you think a little bit. They make those illegal, things like even marijuana, that makes you think a bit. Then there's even much bigger things like DMT and ayahuasca and iboga and all these things, and all those are illegal in the US because they don't want people to get outside of this control grid matrix that they've got people in, which also works through the television programming, and it's called programming for a reason. And then they sell them all these, actually a really horrible thing. One of the worst drugs in the world is alcohol. And, the other side effect of alcohol is that it just makes you kind of dumb. It kind of just makes you, stupid and not think about things and, cheer for football and stuff like that, which, football is fine, but the entire sort of thing is just to keep people pretty much dumbed down. And they've done that. So I guess we started this with the question was, how do people kind of get outside of the system a little bit, and definitely the taxation system. And so what you're alluding to there, I think, is sort of what I've been doing for the last 10 or more years, actually, something called the permanent traveler or prior taxpayer theory, called PT theory or lifestyle. And it was actually created by someone named Harry Schultz way back in like the 60s or 70s, which was really quite amazing because the fact that he was thinking about this stuff even back then is amazing because it's so much worse now. So I could even imagine if I lived in the 60s in the US, I'd be like, yeah, it's, there's taxes and stuff, but it's not too bad. You can still do quite well. There's not a ton of regulation. You could still a lot of freedom. I wouldn't have been so worried about it. But even back then, he was like, no way, I'm not putting up with this. So I'm going to start this sort of, show people how to live in a way that they're not really under the rule of any one government. And that's what the theory is. And it actually turned out Harry Schultz is a big fan of ours now, which is really kind of cool. I didn't even know when I first started doing it, I didn't even know there was a theory to it. I just sort of came up with it mostly on my own. It's not actually that difficult, and we can go into how to do it and things like that. But I sort of started doing it, and then I heard about this, and I was, oh, yeah, that's what I've been doing. And so essentially, it's just a way to get outside of any one government controlling you. And I don't know if you want me to go into all the details of how to do that, but that's essentially how I live. So I don't have to legally, not that I care too much about government laws, but it is nice to know that they don't have a real reason to come after me. I legally don't have to pay taxes because of the way I live. And I essentially live in a way that even everything I do doesn't have to pay taxes, all legally. And this is actually what many of the elites do already. That's why people like Mitt Romney have like 300 offshore companies, and most of the corporations like Apple and all that, they have it all set up in ways that they don't have to pay much taxes, which I applaud. I want no one to pay taxes. Taxes are I think it was, who was it? Sir Isaac Newton or one of them who said that there's only two things certain in life, death and taxes. Well, that's BS. Death maybe, and even that might be going away, but taxes is totally not certain. He was one of those ends. So all the people who founded the U.S., they were all Freemasons. That's why the Washington, D.C. District of Criminals is set up in the way it is all with a Masonic symbolism everywhere because they're all Freemasons. And even on the back of the $1 bill today, the Federal Reserve note is a Freemason symbol of the pyramid with the all-seeing eye. So this has been going on actually for centuries. So even when I think it was Newton or one of those, I forget who it was. I get them all confused. But one of those guys who's founded the U.S., I guess it wasn't Isaac Newton then. So it was, do you remember who said that? There's not.
I believe I was going to say Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin.
Franklin, that's who it was. I always get them confused. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Franklin.
One of those rich white guys from the history books.
Yeah, basically. And so that's essentially how they have it all set up. And they want people to think, well, this is, that we just have to have these governments. You have to be owned by somebody and you owe them money for no reason. And so they've been doing that for a long time. And it's unfortunate, as I started out saying, that it was, back when there was the American Revolution and Independence Day and things like that, people really were standing up and saying, no, you're not going to tell us what to do. And now it's, land of the free in the U.S. It's so unfree. It's one of the least free countries in the world now, but by far. Nothing even comes close except for Cuba, North Korea, Venezuela to an extent. But really after that, it's the U.S. It's just so much rules and regulations and taxes and fines and cops watching you everywhere you go and the government reading all your email, even worse than it was in East Germany when they had the Stasi trying to watch and going around to restaurants and listening to people. They're doing way better than that now. So it's kind of sad that most people don't even realize how enslaved they are, and many people actually enjoy their enslavement. That's why July 4th is such a fun day for so many people. It's like, yeah, we're owned by the best. This is the best people to be owned by, which actually isn't even true. And so, yeah, hopefully people, and I'm sure many people who listen to your show are the kind of people who are like, no, I don't want to be, I own myself. No one else, I did not grant any permission for anyone else to own me. And it's just sad that so many people in the U.S. today have forgotten about everything to do with freedom and liberty. And now they think freedom is things like democracy, which actually the founding fathers, so many of them were against democracy, and they warned about it. They said, if you do this, it's going to be really bad. Now many Americans, because of the government's indoctrination camps, the school systems, 12 years of it, and that was Vladimir Lenin who said, if you give me your child for 4 years, the seed I plant will never be uprooted. Now they have them for 12 years, and people actually think what's so great about the U.S. is democracy. It's like, well, that wasn't the original plan, that's for sure. And now they're like, yeah, so now I guess we got to go around the world and bomb people to give them democracy. It's like, what? So yeah, it's pretty crazy. But hopefully, I'm seeing signs that some people are starting to wake up, but it's just, going to be the collapse of all this craziness is going to be really bad. And then hopefully we can move on after that to some sort of beautiful, free and prosperous sort of world after that. But it's not going to come without a lot of problems beforehand.
Yeah. Amen, man. Yeah, you've laid out quite a bit there. And I think a lot of us see the problems, but Americans, I think many of us just stick with what we know. If we've never traveled outside of the American bubble, as bad as it seems inside, the uncertainty of what's out there can seem even scarier, I think, to a lot of people. And also they're shackled to that 9-to-5 job. They can't have their mobility back. And the critics would say that the permanent traveler kind of lifestyle isn't all that realistic unless you do have a great amount of wealth. But maybe you could dispel that a little bit. Is there too much red tape involved, or is it doable? What are some of the cliff notes to that lifestyle?
Yeah, that's something I hear a lot. And you can actually do what I'm doing very cheaply and very easily, but you have to be smart about how you do it, of course. It's definitely not something that's just for rich people. You can, I know so many people who don't have a lot of money who have essentially done this. So the first step for most people would just be to leave the U.S. And you pointed out right off the bat that so many people are scared to leave the U.S. because on the mainstream media, the television programming, and it's called programming for a reason, they fear. Oh, look, this country, look how bad it is. Look at this. And I've been in many of these places, and it's not. I'm coming in from Mexico right now, Acapulco, Mexico, which according to the CIA is the 4th most dangerous city in the world. And I feel safer here than most places that I've ever been. So that should tell you something. You just turn off the programming. It's fear-based to keep people enslaved into the system. And you pointed out the other things they do as well that also keep people locked into the system. And it's things like their 9-to-5 to pay what? Their mortgage. The mortgage is a French word. Mort, death, gage, contract is a death contract. And now people are having to pay for mortgages are going up like 40, 50 years now. So you're literally working your entire life just to pay for a place to sleep. And there's a great meme I saw once of, I forget exactly what it said, but it just shows this massive traffic jam in Los Angeles or something. And it just said something like, yeah, these people are essentially going to their 9-to-5 job to pay for their car, which they need to get to that 9-to-5 job, so that they can get back home, to go to sleep in the house that they're going to essentially have to pay for the rest of their lives. The whole thing, just when you look at it that way, just seems insane. Now, of course, some people have some extra discretionary income. So maybe they can save up enough to go to Hawaii for a week once a year. But essentially, most people are just chained to what they're doing. And if you look at people who have jobs, those people are the most enslaved by far. If you run your own business, you have so much more options, so much more benefits. If you're an employee and you were working a job in the U.S., you are under so many payroll taxes and you can't write anything off. So that's one big example, right? So let's say you run a backhoe for a construction company or something, right? If you're an employee of that company, you will get you're making $5,000 a month, but after taxes, you're down to about $3,000 a month. And then all sorts of other things, like you have to pay for Obamacare. So you got to pay, and that's just been going up massively. Every year it goes up huge amounts. They say it's the biggest spending thing aside from housing for most Americans now is for their free health insurance, Obamacare. And so essentially you're just, by the end of the day, you really don't have much left. And as we said, if you do want to own a place to live, it's set up in such a way that it's so expensive. And that's actually done by the central banks, which print so much money, which you can never really keep up with. So people are just running and running, and they can never really fully pay for anything. And so if you were that same backhoe driver and you went to a construction company, you said, hey, do you need backhoe drivers? And they go, yeah, we've been looking for one. And you go, okay, I'll work with you guys. I'm a contractor, so you'll hire my company. And then you have so much more advantages. So then the company would actually love it because now there is certain rules and regulations. Of course, there's millions of them in the U.S. You have to be careful about how you do it. But you can, if you're smart, you can do it. And especially if the business owner that you want to do it with is smart, you can do it as well. So you could just say to him, yeah, just hire my company for $5,000 a month. Now that guy who owns the business, he's going to be like, great. I don't have to do all this payroll tax withholding. I don't have to pay half of your Obamacare, all sorts of stuff. So he's like, perfect. Great. I'm happy to hire you. I might even pay you $6,000 a month. You're saving me so much. Now that person who has the backhoe, can write off so many things. Just driving to work every day, write off the gas, their car. Well, they need the car to get there to do the backhoe company. So write off the car. Their house. Well, that's the office where you are taking calls for other jobs that people want to hire your company for. Write off your mortgage. By the end of it, you're essentially not paying too much tax at all. So you're, instead of going from $5,000 a month where you actually see maybe 3,000 of it, you pretty much keep all 5,000 of it. So that's just one example of ways to do things. Now, that's not necessarily the permanent traveler prior taxpayer theory, but that's very similar to the types of things you do with that theory that most people don't know about. They want to keep people enslaved. That's why they have these mortgages. And that's why they also want you to go into college after your 12 years of indoctrination camps, is to go more into debt, because the more into debt you are, the more you're tied down to, you don't have too many options. So if you were just to not even go to school at all, and I'm including like high school and junior high school and all of it, don't even go, which would actually do you a wonder of good. And you're actually just developing your own skills and creating your own companies while you're doing it. You would just be in so much better of a position. You wouldn't be tied down by anything. You wouldn't have any debts, and you wouldn't need those pieces of paper because you're not trying to apply for jobs anywhere. And then I would suggest you try to internationalize the business, get out of the U.S. completely, still do business in the U.S., but not actually as a resident of the U.S. And then you get even more benefits. So there's actually just ways to do this. So I've actually met so many people who have small companies and things like that in the U.S., especially internet companies. And I just talk to them. I could be at a bar, and within 2 minutes, I can save them hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, all legally. And it's so easy. So I'll be talking to someone at a bar, and I'll say, what do you do? And they'll go, oh, I design websites. And I'm like, oh, do you work for someone? They're like, no, I'm just like a freelancer. And I get 3-4 clients a month, and they pay me $2,000 a month each. So I make $6,000-8,000 a month. And I'm like, great. So I guess you're don't pay any tax on that. I'm like, oh, no, I take it all as personal income. So I pay, half of it to tax. And I'm like, well, you don't have to do that. Why don't you put it into a company? And especially if it's an internet company, why don't you put it into an offshore company, which is a zero tax place? Like there's so many of them, so many in the Caribbean, even places like Hong Kong, Singapore, they're much, much lower tax and essentially end up not really paying any tax. And just by doing that alone, I could, right there, I just made that person $50,000 a year over 10 years. They just made $500,000 they wouldn't have otherwise made, but they just don't know this because they're not going to tell you this stuff on TV. This isn't going to be on your nightly television programming, how to actually set things up so that you can actually save more of your own money and not have more of it extorted by these criminal enterprises called governments. And so people just need to get outside of this mindset and stop listening to what they're told they're supposed to do. And once you start to do that, everything gets much easier. And I think you yourself, you've done something similar in that you're kind of working for yourself. You built your own show here. You're doing well. So you've gotten outside of that too, right?
Yeah, but you did just kind of describe me, man, because I have this online business based out of one of the highest tax states and one of the highest taxed countries. And I'm losing a lot of value to the government just because I haven't figured out those little loopholes. I don't really know what I'm doing.
Well, here you go. I'll help you right now. So how do you make your revenue?
It's all online.
So people subscribe. There you go. Mm-hmm. So you set up a company. This is fully legal, by the way. We can put this on YouTube, put it anywhere. This is fully legal. You would just set up a company. I'd set it up in Cayman Islands, wherever. You can do that very easily. Actually, we help people do that. You just go to tdvoffshore.com. A guy who I work with, Paul Seymour there, he's helped so many people set up companies around the world. So you just set that up, and then that's the company that people subscribe to. So now you have no income. Now, what's going to happen now is this company has income, but this company is not paying any tax because it doesn't have to pay tax because it's in a country that doesn't have tax. Now, what I would do if I was you, and this is sort of the smart part to make sure you don't have problems with the U.S. government, if you're going to stay in the U.S., which actually I would suggest you don't, but if you want to stay there, I would just pay myself from that company a wage, and I would keep it as small as possible. And I'd also make sure that the company pays for most things that you like to do. So, if you want to go to a vacation in Hawaii, well, the company has decided that it needs to send you as its employee to Hawaii to check out. And you really, like fully legally, all you really have to do when you're there is talk to someone for a few minutes about something to do with your company. Like, what are they going to say? Yeah. Like, well, how long did you talk to that guy? It's like, I don't know, an hour. Well, I don't know if that's a write-off or not. But it actually wouldn't even matter because that company is actually in a jurisdiction where they have no taxes. So they wouldn't actually be bothering you. The only people who might bother you is the IRS. They might go, well, you're only getting like $600 a month in pay. That doesn't seem right. And you've got a pretty nice house and stuff. And it's like, well, you'd have to work that part of it out. but you could really make it so, you're essentially not paying any taxes and all legally, as I said.
Boom. Yeah, man. Tricks of the trade that the school system never got around to in those 12 years of, quote, life preparation, right?
Yeah, they don't teach you any of this stuff, of course. They teach you how to be a wage slave, essentially. They don't even teach you how the money system works, right? So anything that you really need to know, they're not going to teach you. They're going to make you go there for 8 hours a day until you're just like dying to get out of there. And they're going to make you memorize useless information, make you take things you don't even care about. For me personally, things like chemistry and physics, I just didn't care about that stuff. I was into computers, but they're just going to send you there for like 12 years, which is like, these are pretty important years of your life that you're just wasting in this thing that you're forced to go to get a piece of paper, which is essentially a badge of honor from the government. Like, hey, you did everything we told you to do. Here's your piece of paper. So yeah, it's pretty crazy that most people don't know this stuff. But again, most people just don't even try to look into this stuff. And most people it's amazing. I'll see people who, I like sports. I'm a big hockey fan. So I totally understand when people like sports. But some people will spend like 8 hours a day on like these fantasy sports leagues and everything. And they're looking like they're trying to find, I heard this guy, someone said practice, his leg hurt or something. I'm going to move this around and I'm watching this and all this. It's like if those people spent even just 1/10 of the time actually looking into something kind of important, like what we just talked about, they would just have such a much better life, but they just don't think about it.
Amen, man. I hear you. And so you mentioned that you're coming to us from Acapulco, Mexico this time. I do remember last time we talked a lot about the Gulch, Chile project, which I think is where you were living at the time. I thought that was really interesting. What happened with all that?
Oh, man, that's a whole story. It was a disaster.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's coming out of it now. The short story is I met a guy and he told me that he was a really good real estate guy, and he found a great project in Chile. And actually the property and the project was absolutely amazing. That's partly why I kind of fell in love with it. And I was kind of stupid to not realize that this guy turned out to be just a complete con man. We brought in around like $10 million of buying into this project. It turned out I thought I was part owner of it, but he had already screwed me out of that before I even knew it. And then he essentially he spent most of the money on the land, which is good. So that's something we can get back. And then I think he stole or just wasted a million or two of it. So it's actually been in the courts for at least a year now. And before that, it was a whole year of just getting ready to go to court to get the land back that people had bought. So it was an absolute disaster. It was the worst thing I've ever actually gone through in my life. I'm still trying to get over it. I still have like essentially PTSD from the whole thing. Just a disaster. But the good news is, and actually no one knows this, you're almost getting a scoop here. I haven't told anyone publicly. They won in court just a few weeks ago. And so it looks like they're going to get the land back. So that's great. So, cause that was the big concern was, did everyone just lose all their money on this thing? So it wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy and it wasn't fun for anybody, but it looks like it's going to be back working again fairly soon, depending on appeals and all those sort of things that courts do. So yeah, that was not a fun time for me, but I might have a happy ending finally now on the horizon.
Wow, yeah, that's crazy. So I guess Acapulco is where it's at now. But another fascinating thing I saw you had stumbled upon about the economy is this Shemitah 7-year cycle and this Jubilee year thing. We know the globalists really like their numerology and prophecy and all that jazz, so this just seems kind of par for the course. But break that down for us. What have you come to realize about these cycles?
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. So I've been writing the Dollar Vigilante since 2010, and the reason I started writing that was because I began looking into how the financial and monetary system and the economics and things like that around 2000. And you mentioned at the start of the show that I had a internet company. It was actually the biggest financial internet company in Canada, and it still is to this day. And I found it out of my house in 1994, and by the year 2000, it was worth $240 million, right at the height of the tech bubble. And then after the tech bubble just totally collapsed almost overnight, it was almost worth nothing. In fact, many people said we should go bankrupt. That's how bad it was. But I managed to salvage it, and I managed to sell it just for a fairly small amount of money, definitely nothing close to $240 million. We're talking about 1/100th of that at best. And it was enough money for me to spend a few years just sort of traveling and figuring out and actually just recovering, because that was also a very traumatic experience, having this company that went from almost nothing to within a few years go to $240 million valuation. We had about 250 staff in about 7 countries around the world. Everyone was so into what we were doing and so passionate about it, and then it just fell apart literally overnight, and we had to lay off everybody. And so another sort of really traumatic experience for me. But during that process of sort of salvaging this company and selling it and trying to figure out what happened, someone gave me a book, and the book was The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. And I had heard about the book, but I never read it. And so I had just gone through this huge bubble and huge crash. And so I was incredibly rich and then pretty much broke again. And I read that book and I was like, I wish I knew this information before, because I would have realized that the tech bubble was a bubble, and why it was caused was by the central banks. It's caused by Alan Greenspan. A lot of it was actually that whole Y2K thing, which was such a sham in the end. He talked about that for years. He increased the money supply massively, getting ready for this big Y2K bug that nothing happened at all. And that caused actually a big part of the tech bubble. And so I didn't realize that. So I was like, man, no one knows this stuff. No one knows how the Federal Reserve was found. Actually, most people don't even know what the Federal Reserve is or even heard of it. So I began doing research from around 2002 up until basically today. I still do it all the time. And I was like, there's so much information out there that if people knew this, and actually it was Ford, the founder, the maker of the automobile in the early 20th century, he said if people knew how the monetary system worked, there'd be a revolution tomorrow. And he's totally right. Most people just don't know how it works. It's actually a scam. It's actually a communist-based scam to impoverish everybody and to massively enrich the people who control the central banks. And that's exactly what's going on right now. And that's why we're seeing all these movements against the 1%. It's not really actually even the 1%. It's the 0.0001% who control these central banks. And you don't even know their names for the most part. They're incredibly nefarious. And so this is like a scam, probably the biggest scam put on humanity probably ever, really, if you think about it. It's impoverished people. It's stolen trillions of dollars. It's destroyed economies, central banking. So I looked into all that and I was like, man, no one knows any of this stuff. So it was right around 2007. Or 2006 actually, where I said, this is a housing bubble. This is caused by the central banks. It was actually Paul Krugman, who was in the New York Times, who was calling for a housing bubble after the tech bubble burst. He was saying, oh, we need to inflate the money supply. We need a housing bubble now. And he got it, because he's very much Keynesian, just like the central bankers. That's why they love him so much. That's why they give him their Nobel Peace Prizes, just like Barack Obama. The guy's drone bombing countries constantly and creating wars around the world. So I was just looking at that and I said, yeah, this housing market's going to completely collapse in the US. And that was around 2006. So it started to happen in 2007, really happened in 2008. And as soon as that happened, I said, okay, I know what's going on now and hardly anyone else does. So I'm going to start a website called the Dollar Vigilante and just tell people about this stuff and tell people how they can survive what's going on, but not only survive, but also profit from it. And that's what we've been doing for a long time now. So I forget exactly what the question was at the very beginning. I went on such a diatribe there.
The 7-year cycle, the Shemitah cycle.
I haven't even got to that part yet. So then I started writing in 2010 and going quite well. We're looking at all the numbers, all the data, showing how we're going to have a major, massive collapse again after the last one, the housing bubble in 2008. We're going to have a major one, even bigger than that one. And it's going to happen and I said in 2010, I said within 5 to 10 years. So I said between 2015 and 2020, we could pretty much see massive collapse. We could see every fiat currency go to zero. We could see the entire financial system just wiped off the map. We could just see a depression, unlike the Great Depression in 1929, would look like the really good old days in comparison. So I started to put all the information together on that, and Dollar Vigilante grew and grew and grew over time as I kept making the right sort of predictions, as more people just sort of realized that I'm right on what I'm talking about. And then it was 2 years ago that I heard about a book by Johnathan Cahn called The Harbinger. And I think you are as well, I'm sure. But I'm a huge 9/11 buff. Like to me, that's just... I still can't believe that not every single person has realized what actually happened that day. And, but I think it is actually growing now that more and more people are finally realizing what happened. But obviously it was not what they said it was. And so when I heard about this book, it said it had so many biblical correlations to 9/11. And I was like, okay, well, I wasn't really religious. I called myself agnostic at the time. And I said, well, I'm really interested in this 9/11, and the stuff I was hearing about, I was like, whoa, that's creepy. Like, how'd that happen on that exact date and all this sort of stuff that he sort of correlated to writings back in the Bible. So I read the book and I was like, that was an amazing book. I can't believe the stuff that he uncovered. And one of the things he uncovered in it was something called the Shemitah. So this is something that it goes back to the Torah. It also goes back to the Bible. It was essentially every 7 years, God said in the Bible and the Torah that you're supposed to have a year of rest. It's sort of like the whole thing, making the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested, is similar to that. So he said every 7 years you don't work. And actually that sounds pretty good. I think most people would kind of like that, but that's been forgotten over time a lot. And he sort of rediscovered it in a way. And he also found out the exact times. He went back to when it first started and he said, okay, so this year's a Shemitah, this year. And what he did is he took it up to present day. And it turned out that the last two market collapses, when he had written the book, happened on the exact end day of the Shemitah year in each year. So it happened on September 17th, 2001. which was the first day the New York Stock Exchange opened up after 9/11, and it was the biggest market crash, total collapse in history to that time, and that was on the exact end day of the Shemitah of that year. So you fast forward 7 years, the exact end day of the Shemitah in 2008, and I forget the exact date, I think it was September 23rd. That was the exact end day of the Shemitah. That was the biggest market crash in history to that time, up until that day. And that was the exact end day of the Shemitah in 2008. And the New York Stock Exchange, actually, the Dow, fell 777 points that day. And the Shemitah is very tied into the number 7. Everything's about the number 7 with the Shemitah. So then I was like, this is 2 years ago. And I was like, okay, so when's the next Shemitah? We got to be watching this. And that was actually last year.
Right.
It was September 13th, 2016. So I began talking about it last year, and I was saying we need to be watching this date. And I actually look back into past Shemitahs as well. Even the 1987 market crash happened about 2 weeks after the end date of the Shemitah in 1987. And it just seems to always be something happening on or around that date. And many people on Wall Street actually always talk about the 7-year cycle. It's a very common, well-known thing that there's some sort of 7-year cycle, but no one's really like pinned it down why there is or what exactly dates it is. But it seems to be like a 7-year cycle in the markets. Well, Johnathan Cahn, with his discovery of the exact Shemitah dates, it seems to have nailed it down to that's exactly when we have market crashes and collapses is on the end day of the Shemitah. So I was watching last year, September 13th, 2016.
15?
No, I think it was 13th.
No, 2015.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Yeah, getting all talking about too many numbers here. Yeah, September 13th, 2015. And so I actually, in the month or two before it, I put out a book called, oh man, I even forget the book. I'm doing so many things. It's crazy. It's something about the Shemitah anyway. Oh, Shemitah, I forget. Anyway, it's a book. It's on Amazon, going up on Amazon. I just redid it for this year, actually, because we'll go into why this year is even bigger than the Shemitah. So anyway, in the end days of August, I was one of the biggest search terms on Google. Everyone around the world in the stock markets was talking about me because I'd put together the numbers. I put together a video about it, and I said, this looks pretty legit. Like something major could happen in the September of 2015. But I also said that it was also September 13th, which was a Sunday. So I said there can't be a market crash on Sunday because the markets aren't open. So I'm not sure how this one's going to play out. Now, it turned out that in the weeks before, it was actually 2 weeks before the end of the Shemitah, we had the biggest actual global stock market meltdown in history in the third quarter of last year. So between August, September, October last year, it was the biggest global market collapse in history. The Chinese stock market fell more than 50%. Most stock markets around the world were down well over 10% at one point. The Dow in late August was down over 1,000 points in one day intraday, which was a record. So again, within a few weeks of the Shemitah, we had this thing happen again. So that was really interesting. But the really interesting part was that every 7 Shemitahs, so every 49 years, is something called the Jubilee. And it's actually an extra, Johnathan Cahn and all these people are experts on this. I'm not an expert on the Bible or any of that stuff, but according to them, this is something that happens every 50 years, and it's quite a big deal. It's essentially makes it so the Shemitah that happened every 7 years, the next year after that's even bigger. Something crazier and bigger is going to happen. And it's sort of like an extension of the Shemitah. I've called it the Super Shemitah, and many people call it the Jubilee. So we go through this third quarter last year, and we have a lot of major market problems, but the market doesn't really fully collapse in the U.S. So a lot of people go, oh, Berwick's wrong. And I was like, hey, I never said it was for sure. I just, I knew that this was very interesting information. And it turned out that we actually made a fortune in that period because we started shorting the markets in July and June for our subscribers. We told them to short the markets, and August was a complete bloodbath. And during that 3 days, during when the Dow was down 1,000 points, we had one investment that was up over 4,500% in 3 days. So we did very well, but we didn't see complete destruction on or around that date. So a lot of people said, okay, that must be wrong. Well, it turns out, as I said, that, and I've talked to Johnathan Cahn, I've looked into it, and everyone's like, yeah, the reason it didn't have the big collapse. Now, this could be wrong as well. Like, we don't know. We can't predict the future. But the reason was this is the 7th Shemitah. So now the big stuff happens in the Jubilee year. Now, the Jubilee year started, it's all in the Hebrew calendar. It's not in the Gregorian calendar. So it happens on different dates every year. But it started in September of last year, and it ends on October 2nd of this year. And what I've been discovering about the Jubilee ever since last fall has actually been mind-blowing. There's a lot of things going on related to the Jubilee that I can go into if you want, that is incredibly interesting. And actually, a lot of the things that I predicted about this year have already come to pass. I said there's going to be a massive change, massive washing away. And we've already started to see that. Things like Brexit, things like the European Union right now is on the cusp of complete and total failure. Things like that are all happening. And I can go into how a lot of these things are all set to culminate in October. And in fact, a number of them right on the date of October 2nd, which is the end day of the Jubilee.
Right. Yeah. Give us a little bit on that, because I know you call these the Jubilee jolts, and a lot of stuff is happening. How does this all coalesce into this date in just a few months?
Yeah, so let's talk about the Jubilee. So last fall, I was, okay, this is interesting, because I didn't really think too much about the Jubilee because I was just focused on the Shemitah. But once it was over, I was like, okay, let's look into this Jubilee thing now. So first thing that happened, I'm sitting there, and it was around November, and I was like, okay, I'm not finding too much on this Jubilee yet. Maybe it's wrong or whatever. And then I saw the Pope just announced, and this is back in November of last year, I believe, the Pope announced emergency Jubilee year. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I looked into how the Roman Catholic Church has Jubilees. They actually do have Jubilee years. It's usually every 25 years, I believe. And the next one wasn't supposed to be for numerous years, I think in like 10 more years or something. But he called an emergency Jubilee year. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. So the word Jubilee is starting to crop up here. And then I also said that what we'll see is probably just major market crises and collapse and problems happen. It's probably as soon starting at the very beginning of 2016. And what happened was on the very first day of 2016, markets around the world started to crash, and they continued to crash all the way through January. It was actually the worst starting month of the year in history for global stock markets. It was really incredibly bad at one point. So many markets were just crashing. And I said, okay, this is really interesting, because I was predicting that 2016 is going to be a bloodbath in the markets, and it starts off. And so many times the markets, there's a lot of psychology involved with the markets. So many times what happens in the first month of the year is a sort of an omen or a harbinger of what's going to happen for the rest of the year. And this is quite a well-known thing also in Wall Street called the January effect. Essentially, January, for whatever reason, seems to set the tone. So again, I was like, okay, I seem to be on the right track here. And again, we made a fortune actually in January and even up until today, because we were short heavily the markets again, and we were very long gold and silver and Bitcoin. And since Bitcoin's doubled since the start of the year, gold and silver up, silver's up about 40%. We've been buying calls on these things. We're up hundreds or even thousands of percent on a lot of these things. So again, we're doing really well with just generally trying to gauge what's going on here. And then I think it was in January, the Bank for International Settlements, a guy named William White, and he was essentially their top economist, was quoted at Davos saying, we're on the precipice of, and I'm just paraphrasing here, but essentially what he said was, we're on the precipice of a complete and total collapse, unlike anything ever seen. We're going to see nearly everything washed away. We're going to see so many people find out that so many things that they thought had value didn't. And I think he was alluding to things like government bonds and fiat currencies and things like that. He essentially said all these paper things that people think have value is not going to have any more value very quickly. And then he said something that was incredibly interesting to me. He said, this has been going on for 5,000 years, dating back to Samaria. It's a debt jubilee or a jubilee, he said, and this happens, and it's going to happen very soon, and it's going to wipe away most things. So again, I was watching this. I'm like, okay, he just said it's a jubilee, and it's going to be a complete wipeout. And this is a guy for the Bank of International Settlements, so pretty big name, pretty connected to these elites. And so I was like, okay, so just keep following this stuff, and more stuff keeps coming into place. And so then I started looking around. The end of the Jubilee year is this year, October 2nd. So I was like, okay, is there anything sort of a major, because these Shemitahs and Jubilees are sort of associated as well, not only with a washing away, but just like a major shift to something new. And October 2nd of this year, which is actually, like I said, I can't remember. Is it a Sunday? It's a Saturday, I believe, this year. And so again, there's not going to be a major market crash on that day. But on October 2nd, which is a Sunday, IMF is going to put the Chinese yuan into the SDR currency basket. Of all days, October 2nd on a Sunday. So this is the end of the Jubilee year on a Sunday. They're going to essentially usher in a new currency system, I believe, the SDR. And so this could be part of it. And as well, it's really interesting to note that whenever they have a major banking crisis, financial crisis, market crisis, they usually announce it on a weekend. And so this, again, is on a Sunday. It should also be taken into note, and you might know more about this than me, because I'm just looking into all this stuff. All this is quite new to me. Is on October 2nd, in the evening on October 2nd, the Jesuits are putting in a new priest or something. Now, on the evening. So right, like, you know, as the bell tolls of the very end of the Jubilee year, they're going to put in their new Jesuit priest. Now, you might know a lot more about this than me. I'm just started looking into the Jesuits. They appear to be really tied in with the financial elites. And of course, talking about the number 7, going all the way back, Christine Lagarde did that speech a few years ago about the magic number 7. Oh, and I should point this out. This was absolutely fascinating. And I didn't realize it till after the fact. So we had Brexit, which happened a week or two ago. It happened on a Thursday, I believe. No, the poll was on a Thursday. I think the markets opened on a Friday. And that day was actually, and so we're in the Jubilee year here, right? And they have Brexit, which Britain leaves the EU, which is pretty big washing away of sort of a thing. The next day, the markets open, and it was the worst day for global stock markets in history for a one day. And the really interesting thing that I discovered about that, just right after someone sent it to me, a lot of people are really into numerology and stuff. That day, when the markets opened, had their worst day in global stock markets worldwide, was 7 years, 7 months, 7 weeks, and 7 days from the last Shemitah on September 28th, I believe, 2008.
Damn.
So that was really interesting. So I just keep discovering this stuff, and it just seems to all tie in. I don't even know what to say about it. I know for sure that these markets are going to crash. That's just numbers. That's just math. That's just this whole system is so unsustainable and so on the edge that's going to happen. But I just keep finding all these. I've just sort of uncovered all these things. That just almost every week or two, I get blown away when I discover something that seems to tie in with this Jubilee and Shemitah cycle.
Yeah, man, it is an incredible rabbit hole for sure. I'm right there with you. I have guests all the time that talk about the Jesuits and their role in the power pyramid. Definitely seems like October 2nd is going to be a time to watch. Another thing that's kind of interesting about this is you have a video where you point out that the January 1988 issue of the Rothschild-owned Economist magazine had a cover story, "Get Ready for a World Currency," with the image of an eagle standing on a pile of burning dollars wearing a pendant that said 2018. So 30 years. Again, we know they like their codes. Now that we're only 2 years from that prophetic pendant, it's pretty interesting to see what's actually happening.
Yeah, if you, the only reason to subscribe to The Economist magazine is just to see, because the elites put in a lot of their cover stories and a lot of their cartoons, even a lot of their plans. It's actually crazy, but The Economist is owned by the Rothschilds. And so many things that they put in there just comes to pass soon after, or in this case, long after. Some of these plans are very long. Even the European Union, that was actually hatched at the Bilderberg conference. And actually, I've been to the last Bilderbergs trying to expose them. I was just there in Germany a few months ago. And they hatch these things. They have long, decades long, sometimes even possibly centuries long plans. The people doing these things, I don't even know if they're fully human, to be honest, or if they're not controlled by some sort of entity, because they're just so long planning and they're so good at what they do. And so, yeah, in 1988, I think you pointed out, on the front cover of The Economist, they have a phoenix. It wasn't just an eagle or a bird. It was a phoenix rising out of the ashes. and it said world currency. And then, as you said, it had this almost like an Olympic medal around its neck, and it says 2018. And it looks like it's headed that way. If you look at everything going on, we've had this war on cash that has just been launched in the last year, which is almost getting rid of all paper money very quickly. We're just a massive war on cash. You're seeing parts of Europe now, they're just not even having paper currencies anymore. They're trying to just get rid of them. That's to get everyone into the banking system, in my opinion. And then at that point, because people won't be able to protect themselves, they won't be able to just take out all their money from the bank. They won't even be able to do that. That's what their plan is. They're going to let everything collapse, in my opinion. That collapse might happen this year, in my opinion. And then over the next year or two, as everything's just chaotic and crisis and problems, they're going to come out with their new sort of world currency, their new world government, their new world tax system, a new one world religion, all these sort of things. And they're going to make things so bad, they're going to say, hey, if we have to do this. Look how bad everything's gotten. So I think that's generally the plan, and I can see it working that way. And so it is interesting that the very end day of the Jubilee this year is when the Chinese yuan is going to be added to the SDR basket, the special drawing rights, basically a world currency run by the IMF. So very, very interesting times for sure.
Yeah, that is concerning. And you mentioned the Brexit, and the Brexit vote, on the surface, this totally seems like a powerful, rebellious act against globalization and the consolidation of governments, but I think the puppet masters have too much control to get blindsided by a vote that they allowed to happen. I'm not sure, but that's just what my gut says. What are your thoughts on this? Can we trust the integrity of that Brexit vote?
I think you made some really good points there. I think it's both points that you made I agree with. People are waking up thanks to the internet. People are starting to realize there's just a crazy control system controlling everything, and all the central banks and all the governments, and people are getting sick of it, especially in Europe. And I think they did it on purpose, actually, now that I look at it. They made the European Union so crazy. They have like 5 presidents. No one even knows any of their names. It's definitely not a democracy. It's what I call a technocracy, which is very sort of communist socialist leaning. So they've been putting in literally millions of regulations. I think for like a pillowcase, there's something like 100 EU regulations on how you can make a pillowcase and all this sort of stuff. So it's gotten so crazy, and I think they did that on purpose. I think they're trying to make things so bad that people start to want something else. And I think it's a good thing that a lot of people are starting to wake up to that and go, yeah, this is really bad. We don't want that. So people in Britain, a lot of them were essentially saying, yeah, this is crazy. Just we don't want any part of this giant technocracy. We'll just do our own thing here for a while, which is better. I'm a person who always says, if at first you don't succeed, try again. So I always like, when it comes to governments, when people succeed, including the U.S. So when the U.S. seceded from England in what you could call the first Brexit, if I was around then, I'd be like, yeah, good. Yeah, get away from those guys. Now let's get away from the U.S. government. And I'd like to see it get down to every state in the U.S., which is actually how it was founded. That's why it's called the United States, but it should really just be called the United State now, because the federal government has so much power. But I'd like to see the federal government in the U.S. gone and all 50 states have their own government. And then I'd like to see every city in those states become their own government. And then I'd like to see every neighborhood, and I'd like to see 7 billion people on earth become their own sovereign government. And we'd see peace and prosperity like we've never known it. But so I'm in favor of these things, and there is definitely a uprising going on. People are getting tired of all these central banks and these governments doing all these things. So you saw that with Brexit. The Bilderberg this year was held in Dresden, Germany. Usually every second year they have it in Europe, and then the next year they have it in the U.S. or North America, and then they bring it back to Europe. Last year was in Austria, and I went for that one too, where the only myself, Luke Radowski of We Are Change, and Dan Dix of Press for Truth, we actually infiltrated the conference. We were the first journalists to actually get into the conference room. They kicked us out and everything. But then we went again this year, and the interesting thing was that it was held again in Europe. Very interesting, especially because this is a election year in the U.S., so they would normally have it in the U.S. for sure this year, but they had it in Europe. And I think it's because their focus at this moment in time was on Europe and the Brexit and things like that. And we saw with the Scottish referendum, as there was so much vote rigging, so much manipulation. It looked like the polls showed that most people in Scotland wanted to separate from the UK. And again, I support that. I always support secession. But when the polls came out, when the votes came out, and I think it was Stalin, it says it doesn't matter who votes, it matters who counts the votes, and that's totally true. And they said, oh, no, they didn't secede. And so I was watching Brexit and I thought, okay, I bet they're just going to do that again because it looks like Brexit has enough support, and especially with that Brexit movie coming out, which was crowdfunded and watched by millions of people. Thanks to the internet, the information got out enough that people realized, yeah, we don't want anything to do with this EU monstrosity. And so I was expecting that they would probably just rig the vote again. They've rigged every vote. They rigged even the 2000 presidential election with the hanging chads and the Diebold machines, which are owned by all the same people who run the central banks. And so I was expecting that. So when it actually went Brexit, I was really surprised. I was like, this is awesome. But then I started thinking, I'm like, what are they planning here? Because they wouldn't allow it. They control everything. When it comes to this stuff, when it comes to votes and things like that, especially if it was such a close vote, if they wanted it to be Bermain, it'd be Bermain.
Exactly.
No doubt about it. Absolutely. So I think what they decided to do was to let it go. So many things just absolutely crashing. And that has not ended, by the way. We've had a quiet period here lately. But when you have a move that big and things like the British pound moving down 10% in one day and things like that. You have companies and hedge funds that go bankrupt. You don't even know they're bankrupt yet. And that when they go bankrupt, they will cause another wave of selling and all sorts of craziness. So I think what they're doing is trying to cause a massive chaos in Europe. And what they're going to do is to use that chaos, as usual, problem, reaction, solution, to bring in a new sort of system, which will be more in line with this full one world government they want to bring in. Yeah, it's going to be interesting, but I think in retrospect, it looks like that's what they had planned. If you look at people like George Soros, and he's a very high level insider, he's not at the top of the pyramid by any means, but he's pretty high up on the pyramid. He moved out of all his stock holdings. He actually started shorting the stock market, and he made his biggest position holding gold all in the last 2 months. So what happened right after Brexit? Stock markets crashed all over. He probably made billions of dollars, and gold absolutely skyrocketed, and silver as well. So they plan to do this. I think it's just to create more chaos. And I think as well, though, on the bright side, on the positive note, I think they knew they had to kind of let something like this happen, because if they kept rigging the votes, if they kept stopping people from being able to secede, it would cause people to get out the pitchforks and actually really try to find out who these people are and go after them. So I think to some extent they were forced into this position. And they realized, yeah, we have to let them get a little bit of satisfaction at some point, that they have some sort of control, or could be just an absolute all-out revolt. So it's really hard to say. I'm just guessing on a lot of these things, but from all my research, I think they allowed it to happen. And they're going to also probably allow it to happen in a lot of parts of Europe. And I think what they're going to do is blame this Jubilee collapse. So it might happen by October. And if it doesn't happen by October, it could happen a few months after. It could even happen in the next year or so. Who knows? But it all looks like it's headed towards that direction. It was already headed in that direction. These governments are already bankrupt. These central banks have already been printing so much money that we're now into negative interest rates. This system is broken. When you have negative interest rates, you now have people lending the Swiss government money for 50 years with the promise that they'll pay them back less in 50 years. This system is broken. It's demolished. And so I think what they're going to do is to say, okay, look at all these independence movements. That's what caused this massive collapse. And then they're going to bring in the SDR. And then over the next couple of years until 2018, just make chaos and craziness and blame it all on this sort of secessionist movements and all this freedom talk, and make things so bad that people say, okay, let's go for this one world government SDR thing. It's got to be better than this. So I think that's generally their plan at this point in time.
That's a good breakdown. I appreciate that. I'm right there with you. I'm very skeptical of what's going on. I think that might be part of the plan, is to blame the people for the collapse that they're engineering. But man, so we're getting to the end of the line here. Do you have any extra advice for people trying to keep their financial ship afloat in these rough waters ahead?
I would just say, check out our website. Like I said, dollarvigilante.com. Put in your email there. We'll send you information every day. If you're interested in all the Shemitah stuff, go to surviveshemitah.com. We have a number of videos there, and some of them have gone really viral, which you can actually go back and watch the whole. It's actually 4 in a series now of sort of mini documentaries talking about the Shemitah and Jubilee. So that's information. Really just, wake up to what's going on financially, get out of the paper markets, get out of bonds, get out of most stocks. The only stocks I like right now are gold stocks. And look into things like cryptocurrencies. Really, that's going to be the future. To me, I was around when the internet was launched, or when it came out, and most people found out about it, or not most, but some people, around 1993, 1994. And I compare where Bitcoin is to about where the internet was in 1995. So most people still don't know much about it, but it's going to change the world, just the way the internet changed the world. And there's no way to know how it's going to progress. But if you don't know about it now, that's a huge opportunity. And for people out there who are looking for things to do where they can make money, that's going to be a massive market. Become a cryptocurrency programmer or become knowledgeable on it, because a lot of companies are going to need consulting on it and need to know how to accept things like Bitcoin and how to hold them, how to store them. So just like if you're around in 1995, I would say figure out everything about the internet and then become a consultant, become a programmer, become an entrepreneur. Same thing with Bitcoin. Huge opportunity for people to look into.
Amen, man. I've always been saying for the past year, if you want to secure your kid's future, get them a 3D printer. Teach your kid how to use a 3D printer, how to master that technology, because logic tells you that's going to be kind of important once everybody gets wind of it.
Yeah.
But man, thanks so much for coming on. We'll have to do this again before the 3-year mark this time, but it was great talking to you. Take care of yourself.
All right. Thank you.
All right, man. Holy hell, hallelujah, sweet baby Jesus and the rest of it. We did it. I have had several requests to get Jeff back on and finally got down to it. I do like Jeff. I think he has some interesting knowledge about the workarounds of the system, and he's a great speaker. But I don't actually subscribe to the anarcho-capitalist mindset myself, which is fine. I've had plenty of guests on that have views other than my own, as long as we agree on a lot of the big important things and recognize that the deck is stacked against the people in this Rockefeller Rothschild 9-to-5 Pokemon Go reality. And that's a huge area of agreement between us. But I don't subscribe to any real philosophy because I don't think any of them work for all situations. And whatever you present, socialism, capitalism, whatever, I can probably play devil's advocate and find some flaws. I've had a lot of positions consistent with libertarianism, but I think getting rid of the minimum wage and trusting corporations to pay us accordingly to the value of our work without regulation is completely insane. And that is a big thing for the Libertarian Party. And with a lot of these philosophies, everyone is worried about the size of government. I don't really care about the size. I care about the motivations. My real point, though, is that I've seen experts talk about maglev technology that can take you in a bank drive-through window-style tube from New York to LA in 10 minutes with no pollution whatsoever. You could go to New York for a lunch break if you live in Los Angeles. That's nuts. I've also seen new solar panel paint that could charge electric cars while they drive. So what I want is that stuff. I want the futurist stuff implemented as soon as it's ready, on an ongoing basis, for the betterment of society. That's my ism. But let's take the solar paint, for example. If that's a private company who makes it, they're not going to solar panel paint the roads unless they make money. So without taxes or government, are we just going to individually pay a fee to use that road? And for how long? So do they just own all the roads now? There's no opt-out if it's already painted. Do we have a non-painted road next to the painted road so you don't have to pay the fee for the paint? I just don't like a world run by big business. So for some things, we need a government, and maybe even a big one. But if the brightest minds were given government contracts for anything useful besides weapons, then maybe we could implement some of their inventions for the good of the community, and taxes would have been paid for the scientists to invent the tech and for the paint to be implemented on the road. And we all win. There's even job creation in there somewhere. I don't know, it's all very complex, but I do want to take the profit motive away from a lot of things, or at least channel it differently. We talked about the police problems in this show, and of course, I'd like to overhaul the whole system, and it's all connected, so it's a huge conversation, but the best free market idea I've heard for solving the police issue is to have them all get insurance, like doctors do. Accidentally killed a black guy on purpose insurance. I'm kidding, but people who ended up killing a lot of people would have their premiums go up until they're priced out of the police force. Hopefully, very quickly. And the police would have a financial incentive to de-escalate situations and solve them without violence, or at least without death. Financial incentives. The only incentives anyone seems to give a shit about anymore. But that's a good way to use one. They also need to be trained better, but that's a whole nother thing. I can watch dozens of videos online of badasses disarming people with their bare hands. Why aren't they the cops? But obviously that insurance concept is a simplification of what would be a really complex system, but I think that there's a great remedy in there somewhere if we're going to live in a money rules everything kind of world. And it seems like we are, unfortunately. But when someone starts telling me about their ism or their ist, I just say, okay, in this paradigm, who paints the solar-powered roads and when do we get them? If your ist or ism has not addressed that yet, it is incomplete. Although none of this has anything to do with Jeff Berwick, it's just what came to mind. But the Shemitah stuff, the Economist One World Currency stuff, all great if you ask me. So what did we talk about in the second hour? Why should you sign up for Plus? What did you miss out on that you can't possibly go on living without? Well, all sorts of stuff. But we got deeper into that October 2nd date to watch out for. Side note, something Jeff also had discussed in other forums that we didn't get to talk about here, but we did discuss a long time ago when it happened. If you remember that cube that was added just a year or two ago to the Georgia Guidestones, it contained numbers on multiple sides, but if you assume them to be a code, perhaps a date, August 14th, 2016 could definitely be one that would work. So think about that on August 14th. It's only about 30 days away. I'm not saying something's going to happen, but if it does, think of the Guidestones. But in the Plus show, we also talked about opportunities in a collapsing world, new technologies, new implementations of the blockchain and Bitcoin tech, ways our future could be better, innovation. I love that kind of stuff. We talked Bitcoin being a CIA creation, and a lot more about the police problem and the flat earth theory. Oh, that's right. Did you guys know Jeff Berwick also had Eric Dubay on his podcast? Well, if you heard the Plus show, you do. So I wanted to hear where Jeff was on that serious issue, and that was a lot of fun. So all good stuff. Sign up for Plus, and all your wildest dreams will come true. Thanks for listening. This next show is getting into some fun stuff, and it's almost done, so I might just put it out tomorrow. Fuck it. There are no rules, right? I work for nobody but you, so with your permission, people, I'm clocking out for the day. Keep an eye on October 2nd and August 14th, and I'll see you soon. Your move, economic archontic parasites, Shemitah cycle sorcerers, and consolidators of currencies. Your fucking move.
Have a drink and a smoke. Listen to the cast. We shine a shiny spotlight. Put criminals on blast. The pinstripe men of mourning and families of finance. DuPont, Windsor, and Rothschild. The kids don't stand a chance. The kids don't stand a chance. I said the kids don't stand a chance. We're looking for the answers to questions never asked. So we come to the Carlwood for the higher side chats. The pinstripe men of mourning and families of finance. DuPont, Windsor, and Rothschild. The kids don't stand a chance. The kids don't stand a chance. I said the kids don't stand a chance. Involved in shady business, we try to get a glance. We're working on the numbers. Resistance must advance. The pinstripe men of mourning and families of finance. DuPont, Windsor, and Rothschild. The kids don't stand a chance. The kids don't stand a chance. I said the kids don't stand a chance. The kids don't stand a chance. I said the kids don't The kids don't stand a chance.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the first hour of the Higher Side Chats podcast with me, Greg Carlwood. If you don't know, there is a second hour to all the episodes we do around here. Generally, we're able to get a lot deeper into the topics and ideas that a guest is about, so if you enjoyed what you've heard from THC for free, consider signing up at thehighersidechatsplus.com to get the second hour of the 5 shows I put together each month. I never really wanted to be a paid subscriber podcast, but I really hate the idea of spending airtime promoting some product that's completely unrelated and telling you the best way to support the show is to buy an audiobook or new underwear by mail or something crazy like that. So instead, if you like the show, double your time with it for $5 a month and let's cut out all the other shit. It's half the price of a movie ticket and you get at least an extra 5 hours of show a month. Collectively, it keeps us stable and it frees me from wasting your time with anything but the show you came to listen to. It's really the only way for an independent one-man show to make it, and I do what I can so that it's worth your while. Since we started this, I've always tried to use the subscriptions to improve the podcast and make signups more advantageous. It started with just a second hour for the main show, but now we've got a nice forum going where people can get deeper in conversation about the episodes with other listeners, submit a candidate in the guest request thread, or share their own personal projects to get out of the soul-crushing 9-to-5 cog-in-the-wheel life on the entrepreneurs thread. The forum and the plus comments are always the first places I try to go for listener engagement, but it does get harder as the show gets more popular. Because of that, there's also a direct messaging feature that you can use to reach me through the plus site also. But beyond the forum, if you like any of the music I've used for THC, most of it I've hired artists to make, and I provide it all as free downloads to Plus members too. So if you like a particular song you've heard close the show out recently, come get the MP3. I should also mention that if you don't like the idea of paying $5 recurring every month, I get that. You can buy 3 months, 6 months, or a year up front and just be done with it. I have plenty of listeners who send checks and money orders to the P.O. Box too. I try to make it as easy for people as I can, and you can read more about it on the sign-up page. Also, be sure to check out the FAQ help page on the Plus site if you have any questions or concerns about how to listen to a password-protected show on your devices. I've highlighted a lot of great solutions, and one of those would be the iPhone app that just recently hit the Apple App Store. A super kind and talented listener made it for us, and you can use it to stream or download either the free or the Plus show. If you're on Android, I'd use Pocket Casts or Podcast Addict and subscribe to the feed manually that way. I also try to throw in occasional bonus shows or Q&A shows, and I've got a few other weird ideas I might get to try out soon, but I give you all I can for $5, and I hope you'll at least give it a shot if you've listened to a few free shows and you find them unique or valuable. I know there's a lot of podcasts out there, and I'm just one of them. But if you have any questions, concerns, or comments about any of this, please get in touch with us at the Higher Side Chats team at gmail.com. I also wanted to plug the Higher Side newsletter I'm going to be putting out, totally free for anyone who wants to sign up at the main internet website for the show, thehighersidechats.com. You can also get on that email list through the Higher Side Chats Facebook page. There's a button there as well. But the reason I'm doing this is because I get tons and tons of emails after a show goes up asking me about how I feel about a particular guest or topic, and the wrap-up isn't always the best place to do that, especially if I have anything negative to say. Sometimes the dust needs to settle. Sometimes I need to hear feedback from you guys first. There are a lot of factors, but I usually have something to communicate to you, and I just don't get to do it. So on the first of the month, I plan to send out a little newsletter with my thoughts about the 5 shows the previous month, and talk to you about anything else that's on my mind or that's going on. And what's probably most enticing is that I'm going to give you some insight into at least one guest I have coming up in the month, which people have been begging for some posted schedule for a long time. I personally think I'd like the surprise. But sign up for the Higher Side newsletter. It's free. It comes out on the first of the month, and I won't waste your time with any other emails. And that's it. I appreciate you listening. I try to give alternative ideas and guests a fair shake on a high-quality podcast, expose some deep-level conspiracies without the yelling, and I hope to offer some inspiration that even though the system relentlessly suggests you should follow their blueprint to mediocrity, you can do your own thing and live a much happier life despite all the negativity in the world. So go ahead and treat yourself. Isn't it about time?